Mayor Sam Telfer wears a number of hats. He is the Mayor of the Tumby Bay Council, but he is also the Chair of the Local Government Association for the Eyre Peninsula. He's the immediate past President of the Local Government Association across the whole of South Australia. And he's also throwing his hat into the ring to replace Peter Treloar as the member for Flinders at the next state election for the Liberal Party. But we don't talk about state politics directly here. It comes up in this interview, but we talked about a range of challenges councils are facing for their financial sustainability going into the future. Mayor Sam Telfer, Mayor of Tumby Bay, thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Always a pleasure.
Now, just tell us a bit about what's happening in the Tumby Bay area, first of all.
Oh, it's lovely living weather at the moment, isn't it? Across the whole of South Australia, spring is around the corner or upon us, and it's really great to see people out and about. We're obviously dealing with challenging COVID times at the moment, and people have been responsible with the way they travel, but that means that we can have people going across the great state of South Australia and visiting our regions, which is always exciting to see.
And it's great to have all that regional tourism, bringing money in through the caravan parks and the like, I imagine, as well in your council area?
Yeah, and that is really key, as I was saying, because there's not the interstate or the worldwide travel. There's the opportunity for us to travel within our state, and it is exciting for our local businesses to see visitation continue even through challenging COVID times.
Yeah, and much as we want to see the back end of the pandemic, we're stuck with it for another year. If people wanted to say, well, 2020, goodbye to that, let's look forward to 2021, but we're still soldiering on, and if councils are going to see a longer-term trend of regional tourism, it'd be great to invest in infrastructure, but it's getting hard to get the rate revenue in to do it.
Yeah, and this is the balance that councils have got to make across the whole state. I mean, obviously, we're trying to make sure we're responsive to what our communities are needing, and especially we've seen during COVID, councils have been very reticent to lift any rates any higher than they need to in response to the challenging times that the people have been having across their council areas. But also, it's recognised that local government does have a key role to play when it comes to what happens next. You know, in the aftermath or dealing with COVID, there needs to be investment in infrastructure and job creation, and local government does have a role with that. But that balance is a real fine one between how much we ask our ratepayers to try and allow in our budgets for our rate rises, and also, what partnerships we can bring in with state and federal government.
Yeah, and that on that partnership front, getting grants to do major projects, does it concern you that councils struggling to actually be able to do much without a grant? That you're really almost beholden to state and federal governments to get major works happening in your council areas?
Well, I think the key, especially for us in regional areas, is for state and federal governments to recognise that it's not just the locals in each small council area that get advantage from strategic investment and strategic grant spend. It is the population from the whole state or the whole country. So that's the partnership that really needs to continue to develop. Local government is best placed to be able to put expenditure on the ground and do it as immediately as possible. And I think that both state and federal governments are starting to recognise that. We've seen some ingenious sustainability projects which councils have partnered with state and federal government, and that sort of investment, especially if it is across all different council areas, does spread government spend right around the state or right around the country. So we know that the jobs that are created will be ones that are spread across the whole state and country as well.
Yeah, we're rolling into a federal election, and there's a state election in South Australia as well, and sometimes pork barrelling is accused about certain grants in certain areas. Is it more desirable to have, and I know there's that financial assistance grants, for instance, is it more desirable that there's a recurrent amount of funding that automatically goes to councils rather than, grant by grant?
Yeah, and that's what the local government have been asking for, is that if we lift the recurrent spending, which goes across all different councils, there's no sort of accusation of strategic spending from federal or state governments when it's spread across all the different councils. And it is shown that, especially in our smaller councils, which, their economy actually contributes a whole heap to the state domestic product or the GDP of the country, but we don't have the population levels, and thus if we're trying to rely on ratepayers from within our area, it becomes a real stretch, as we've pointed out already. So a higher contribution from federal and state directly to councils will mean that expenditure is spread right across the whole country, and then we'll be able to try and build up the economy across the whole lot rather than just in strategic areas.
The interviews we do across a whole range of councils in not just South Australia but other states as well, there seems to be this common thread when they do their representation reviews of how many councillors they should have representing them. Federally, you see population grow and you get more MPs, but we seem to be having less councillors.
Yeah, and this is a process which has been in the state legislation on local government ever since it was established, and a similar sort of one is in the latest iterants of the local government legislation. Every 7 years, councils need to have a good look at their representation. So, traditionally there's been councils that have looked at having a mayor popularly elected from the people or elected from within the council, or, whether there's a ward breakup of a council or it's area councils across the whole lot. And then, like you're saying, the actual final number of elected members for representation. We've got to the situation in some councils where there's high teens or even over 20 councils in elected members on a board. And when it comes to strategic decision making, when you've got that many people on a board, it is pretty difficult to do. So that's what trying to get the representation right and having the community deeply involved in that. So any representation review, there's a significant consultation piece with the community. Make sure that decision that's made is the one that actually suits the individual council and not dictated by other levels of government, but the one where their community is actually driving it. So we have seen a trend that has meant that there's less elected members across the state. And I think as long as we're looking after our elected members and they are well equipped to make those decisions that are the right ones for their community, it really is up to the community to make the decision on how many elected members are best to represent them.
Yeah, and last point on that, you've mentioned the community and decision making with local government. From your experience, is it more desirable to have, politicians, councillors in this sense, more close to the people that actually elect them, or is it because the trend seems to be towards federalised and central power in Canberra? Which way do you lean on that topic?
Oh, look, it's really key. It doesn't matter what level of government you're at. You have an understanding of what your community needs are, where the opportunities are, and where their expectations are going forward. So that close connection to the people is really key, and communication two ways is the real key point. So it's something which councils have been really focusing on, making sure that they're getting clear, concise information out to communities. We really need to have elected officials that are listening to their communities and responsive, and then taking all that into account, making the right decisions.
Mayor Sam Telfer, thanks again for joining us on the Flow Network.
Always enjoyable to be on.